Welcome to the sixth video in the StageNow series. In this video, we will explore StageNow troubleshooting tools and techniques and see how they can be used to solve common problems. Here's the recommended troubleshooting flow that doubles as our agenda. The steps are ordered to maximize your efficiency based on our experience of how frequently the issues occur in a particular step and how difficult the steps are. We'll look at ensuring that versions of all components involved are aligned to support your goals, how the error messages and logs are generated and processed by StageNow, and how you can understand where the problem happened. Finally, we will apply this knowledge to troubleshoot common profile flow issues. Before engaging in any troubleshooting, you absolutely want to ensure that all the components involved have the right versions. Let's take a look at how to do this and why it is important. Consider this example. A profile with a single step using app MGR CSP fails with could not decode profile data error. What is going on? See the DSD version invalid? DSD, dataset definition, is a special XML file that describes how to pass instructions to CSPs. Each CSP has one. These files are used by StageNow on your PC to create the profile, the StageNow client on the device to interpret it, and by the MX framework itself to actually execute the instructions. Obviously, as StageNow and MX evolve, the DSD files evolve as well. So, looks like this one got out of sync. Why? There are many components involved in deploying and applying your StageNow profile to the device. Let's follow the trail and see what might happen. First, the profile that is generated in your StageNow workstation tool has to be delivered to the StageNow device client and interpreted. Then, the StageNow client will deliver instructions to the MX components, MXMF and OSX, responsible for actually executing the instructions. What would happen if there is a version mismatch somewhere along the path? Your staging will either throw an error, sometimes a really cryptic one, or even worse, misbehave and not do what you expect it to do. How long will it take you to debug and fix it? A long time. So this is why we say check the versions before doing anything else. It all sounds obvious, but it happens very often. Fortunately, it is really easy to keep them all in check. They are all on two screens. The StageNow About screen for the Workstation tool, and the Client Info screen in the StageNow device client, accessible via the menu. Here we can see that the device is running MXMF version 5.0. and so is ahead of the OSX version, which is 4.4. As a result, the functionality status is showing partial. What does this mean, and what is the difference between MXMF and OSX? In many cases, the instructions you want to execute can be executed fully by MX itself. For example, launch an application. But sometimes, for certain features, MXMF had to depend on the underlying OS. This is where OSX comes into play. Essentially, it's a part of the OS that grants MX access to advanced features. An example would be enabling the enhanced application signature verification. MXMF can be updated separately from the OS, while OSX can be updated only with the whole OS. As such, sometimes your MXMF version may run ahead of OSX version, and instead of full functionality, you would see partial, like here. Partial does not necessarily mean you're in trouble, but rather that you should be aware of the fact that some of the OSX dependent features might not work. Now, let's go back to our example and see if any of this version knowledge helps us to troubleshoot it. Here's the barcode staging sheet for that profile and the client info. We can see that the profile was created with MX 5.2 in mind, but the client only has MXMF 5.0 and OSX 4.4. Now, in some cases this is okay, since the features are backwards compatible, but in other cases it can cause an error. How can we check that? By going to the documentation. There is an official MX feature compatibility matrix online, also available via StageNow Help. It lists all the CSPs, all the features, and their minimum requirements. It also has handy filters by device model, MX version, OS X version, and Android OS API level. Give it a try. Using this matrix, we determine that the App MGR Launch an Application by Name feature that we're using in the profile was first implemented in MX 5.1. Thus, we cannot use this feature with this device unless we update the MX on the device first. Had we created the profile for MX 5.0 from the start, the feature would not even have appeared at all in the available action list. To resolve the problem, simply stage the StageNow and MX upgrade profile that comes bundled with every StageNow version. You would have to go through a few wizard steps first in order to specify the WLAN parameters, but you can skip the whole deployment section as it is already pre-configured. After the update, the client would show the new version for both MX and the StageNow client, and the profile will work. Note that this is a good example of a feature carried out entirely in MX/MF with no dependencies on OS X or OS versions. We only need to update MX/MF to get the new functionality. The OS X version is still 4.4. No need to wait for the whole new firmware release. However, if the feature you need requires a higher version of OS X, you would have to wait until the new firmware. As such, the OS X version is an important consideration that serves as a lowest common denominator when planning staging for multiple device types and firmwares. Alright, this concludes our first example showcasing the version mismatch troubleshooting. Let's summarize. Some features require specific client, MX, OS X or OS versions. Before doing anything, check the versions. It's simple and quick, but you'll be amazed how often we see it happening. So always do it first. Don't be put off by the partial functionality. Use the compatibility matrix to check the features supported and update MX or the entire firmware if necessary. Choose the correct version of MX from the start and you'll be fine. Okay, let's move on. Now that we know that our errors are not related to some version mismatch, let's actually proceed to understanding and processing them. StageNow has lots of different types of error, and it is common that one issue triggers lots of others. Here's an example of a profile that tried to download and install an app, but failed. StageNow 2.3 Plus makes understanding errors much easier for you, with friendly error messages instead of cramped log files. But anyway, look at this. What is an FMC file? No idea. The thing we really need to look at is the error number. See number 3? It means that this error was triggered by something else. Let's take a look at prior errors just by scrolling the screen. Error number 2 says, a file or folder could not be found. Okay, we might have forgotten to include something in the flow, but let's look at error number 1 first. Oh, now it's simple. We just did not have the connectivity. It is very important to always check the first error first. In fact, there is a way to do it even better. Instead of having to deal with stacks of errors, just go to StageNow settings on your PC and flip first error termination. It is off by default. Now StageNow will stop at the first error instead of carrying on and triggering more. Simple as that. Useful? Actually consider leaving it on by default. If you have upgraded to StageNow 2.3, you will also notice that not just the error messages look different, but also the logging in general has changed. The logging submenu has been replaced with last staging error, and you can only see the logs from the last staging operation. If you go to the menu in the last error screen, you can see and change where the logs are stored. When you look into those, you will also see that they are a lot more comprehensible, but also show only the last staging operation. They get overwritten every time. This makes it very important to pull the logs timely if you need to keep them. There are, however, cases when you may want to control the error processing along the course of the flow, such as ignore errors at some steps but stop on others, or do the try-catch exception processing. For this, check out the XML MGR CSP. Inserting it anywhere in your flow will allow you to control the error processing. For try-catch logic, make sure to read the documentation. It's not as obvious as it looks. For example, multiple try-catch clauses do not work. In the end, StageNow is a staging tool and not a full-blown MDM solution. Let's summarize. Always check for the first error in the flow. Save yourself trouble by always stopping at the first error. When you need more complex scenarios, leverage the XML MGR CSP. Now that we know how to control the errors, let's take a look at a few examples. Reboot the device, deployment instead of config. Let's take a look at this profile. It is very simple, has just 2 steps to create and connect to a WLAN, but will fail when staging an out-of-box device, with a seemingly unrelated error. Can you see why? The key here is that the setting is in the deployment section. Remember that everything in the deployment section, be it files or settings, actually has to be downloaded over FTP. Does an out-of-box device have any connectivity? So, there you go. You can also see the notice on the barcode sheet for this. Solution? Just put it in the configuration section instead of the deployment section. Speaking of the configuration section, here's a very typical app deployment profile. Download the APK, install it, download a config file, launch the app, etc. Note, however, that all the settings are placed in the configuration section of the profile. We see that quite often people forget to switch to the Deployments tab and cram everything into the configuration section. While not an error by itself, this may lead to an excessive number of barcodes or even this error message. And you will wonder why. So just keep in mind that there are 2 tabs there. Our previous example already touched on the connectivity. Let's take a deeper look. This is a reminder of how StageNow usually gets the data. The scanned barcode contains the IP address of the StageNow FTP server, where the rest of the information can be downloaded. What can go wrong with this network access model? Well, lots of things. Here are the common things we're seeing. All of them usually result in the same familiar error message. So what can you do? Fortunately, StageNow, especially version 2.3 Plus, makes it fairly easy. Let's review the best practices for getting the connectivity right in a visual way. Try mapping the problems on the left with the best practices on the right. 1. What do you do to avoid the Wi-Fi off or airplane mode problem? Turn Wi-Fi on explicitly. This will work even if you are in the airplane mode. 2. How to ensure there's always the right profile. Create it explicitly. What if such a profile name already exists? This is your homework. Try it in StageNow and see if you need to delete the profile before creating a new one. 3. How to ensure that if more than one WLAN profile exists, the device is on the right WLAN. Just disable all profiles and then enable yours. Or even better, disable all profiles and then create yours. 4. Obviously, if StageNow is not running, you'll need it on. Remember the warning on the barcode sheet? 5. But what if it has the wrong IP? Is this avoidable? It is not, at least not as of StageNow 2.3. You will have to ensure you're using the right IP address and regenerate the barcode. Remember that the IP address is hard-coded in the barcode. Finally, if you suspect firewall, just check the connection manually. Let's summarize by actually creating a good flow that gets the connectivity right. First, disable all WLANs. Then, create yours and specify Wi-Fi enable in it. Then, connect to it. All of this goes into the configuration section. It's as simple as this and saves lots of trouble. The only thing left to keep in mind is the right StageNow IP address, which you also see in the error message. Now, let's take a look at the typical issues that happen while installing the apps and managing files. Take a look at this error message and the setting that generated it. Why would this happen? If you look at the APK path and name section closely, you will see a typo. Note the original error message section. This is what you would see in the logs if you are running StageNow 2.2 or older. See how the new messages are a lot more helpful? Here's another example. This time we will make it harder for you and blank the suggestion. Can you guess where the problem is? Another typo and tool and the enhanced error message. Make sense? Also note the FTP username and password that can be used to manually test StageNow FTP server connectivity. Okay, those two were easy. Their main goal was to demonstrate how useful the error messages can be. Now to the more interesting case. The APK file exists in the path provided and is not corrupt, but it does not install. Why? The best thing to do when the StageNow installation fails is to try installing manually. First, let's ensure that the file is there. Well, the file is there, has the right name and is in the right location. Let's try installing it manually. Why does it say update? Do we have it installed? Indeed we do. Now Android doesn't like it when you install over an existing app, which is in fact one of the suggestions of the StageNow error screen. Solution? Just always use upgrade instead of install. Android is perfectly fine when you're upgrading an app that does not exist. It will simply be installed. Okay, that was it. Now, let's play a game that will help you check what you've learned. You will see a question pop up. Pause the video and think of your answer. Then unpause and check. Let's see how many of them you can get right. Let's go. This was the last one. Hope you did well. Okay, that was it. Let's summarize what we've learned. Start with version check. It is quick. Use the compatibility matrix and set the correct MX version in the profile to avoid issues. Always pay attention to the first error or set the first error termination. And remember to check your flow logic. Well done! We hope it was worth your time. See you next time!